Hello! Games are fun. Games with maps are fun. How does one game map? You may think easy, have a drawing, then some dots, and you're good. But how do you dot? How does the dot know its purpose? How does it navigate its place in this crazy world? The answer is me. I am the arbiter of right and wrong. I give the dots their purpose. I am trying to copy Star Wars Battlefronts, which has these features in this list. Dots that represent locations and places between locations. Lines between dots that create valid paths. Each dot has an allegiance to a team. Your team has one or more fleets. You can move your fleets between adjacent dots. If you end your turn with a fleet on your enemy's dot, you can trigger a match. And then you'll travel to the match place and you fight. So I made some dots and I named them nodes, and I gave them each a node script. And I made them keep track of their own connections. Then I made a line with a line script. The line script orders the line to stand between two nodes and stretch to fill the gap. Then I made the nodes grow and shrink based on whether or not the mouse was hovering over them. Next I made these elegant and complicated fleet dots. They have a dot they are attached to and teleport to its position. It was about this time that I realized I had a problem. Controllers! The setup worked perfectly fine for a mouse and keyboard, but there was nothing a controller could do to interact with this interface at all. To make things simple, or so I thought, I made the controller, left joystick, control this crosshairs. And then this A button allows it to mimic left click. It actually took some doing to get it to mimic the hovering feature. I did a UI raycast and found all the items below the cursor and then ran the hovering command. And I put them all in a list. I did this because the next frame I might not be hovering over it anymore, in which case I would need to run the stop hovering command and then remove them from the list. And now I can use the controller as well as the mouse. All I had to do was get the cursor to follow the mouse when I'm using the mouse, and boom, everything works. At first, all I did for movement was on whoever's turn it was, they could click to a point and the fleet could move to where it was. But I realized that had some flaws. I wanted to mimic Battlefront 2, which would eventually mean creating more than one fleet. But the system I had made, only one fleet could ever be moved ever. I could create a system where it only moves the one that can move that way, but that might lead to a scenario where two ships can go to the same place and it moves the one you don't want to move, and so I created a system where the first click selects the fleet and the second click chooses where the fleet goes. Next came the launching of attacks and the changing of allegiance upon victory. I made a button for launching whichever scene had the same name as the node the fleet was on, but I realized there was no way to get the data from the battle. I tried saving the victory data to a file and then reading from that file upon loading the map screen again. How was I supposed to get that file to the node that needed to change? So I created a central planner, a node manager. So this is actually an interesting lesson in design that seems obvious, but took me a little bit to start implementing here. That is the idea of the data controller, then the view and the view controller. What I had been building up to this point was each node was basically independent. It had its own data, its own allegiance, its own connections list, etc. But what I was realizing is this might be made to work, but it was horribly inefficient and hard to understand and hard to change. What I needed was one big controller that would hold all the nodes, all the fleets, all the connections, and control every possible interaction between the elements within itself. I created a public static list of all map nodes into the map controller. Public static list of all fleets into the map controller. List of all connections into the map controller. I created a data type / class called GameState. It actually takes inspiration from 3D meshes when I made a game where you could cut them. I'll link the tutorial that I learned it from down below. It's actually really interesting. The mesh class has several lists of numbers. Vertices, triangles, UVs, and normals. Vertices are the points, kind of like the points on my map. They have position, and my nodes have their own positions and names. The triangles are actually a list of integers, which in groups of 3 refers to the index of a point in the vertices list. This is like my connections list. It makes, except it takes 2 instead of 3, because I'm drawing lines and not triangles. Then, instead of allowing the data to be stored and controlled by the UI elements themselves, the controller creates and destroys UI elements as it sees fit, telling them where to go and what to say. This is much more clean and easy to understand, and edit too. Instead of handling clicks themselves, all the nodes do is just tell the view controller what's happening, and the controller will handle it. Boom! Add a list of fleets, now it controls the fleets, and they don't control themselves. One last touch. If I make this data controller a public static class and not a mono behavior, then it does not die between scenes like I thought it would. Which means that whoever wins can just directly message the data controller instead of this weird, complicated file handoff that I was trying to do before. And there we go. Now the map is being controlled, the fleets on the map are being controlled, everything is cleaner, much more understandable, and works so much better. And I guess that's my lesson for today. Try and learn existing design principles. It will probably always be better than learning them from scratch on your own. And if you can, always try and keep the control in one class. This separation of nodes with their own scripts was becoming far too complicated and unmanageable. And sure, each one still had their own script. I still have to click on them, of course, but the logic isn't inside them anymore, and that makes everything just better. But of course, I have my map with nodes and working allegiance shifting, but only 2 locations that those maps connect to. I guess in the next part, we'll have to start filling it with new location ideas. But that's for next time. Thanks for watching, and peace be with you.